Welcome back. Let's take you to this now. The newly formed Civil Society Electoral Reform panel says it's not in competition with the recently appointed Ministerial Advisory Committee on Electoral Reform. The CS ERP, launched at Constitutional Hill in Johannesburg, is aimed at mobilizing civil society in developing an alternative electoral system which ensures that government is accountable to the people. The entity comprises representatives from NGOs and social movements. It was set up to broaden electoral reforms after the agreement that the Electoral Amendment Act was only to be used for the 2024 elections. My Vote Counts Executive Director Minhaj Jeenah joins us now via video link to unpack this. Minhaj, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Perhaps let's get context firstly on why we saw, many civil organizations opposed to the Ministerial Advisory Committee on Electoral Reform, which received a lot of criticism due after it was implemented, I think a few days, weeks shy of the 29 May 2024 elections.
So the critiques of the states panel was that it consisted of individuals who are compromised, it didn't have any individuals within civil society. Now, those critiques came from a number of NGOs. That's not necessarily the critique of the panel. The purpose of the panel is not, as you said, Renati, to oppose the state panel, but rather it's to present an innovative way of engaging with the state.
So talk to us then about, the makeup of this particular panel. And I'm very much interested in the role that civil society plays, particularly as we try to deepen, democracy and engage, in the electoral reform, as we, of course, now look to other elections that are going to be taking place in this country, as we look forward to the 2029 elections too.
Yeah, so the panel is made up of nine organizations, which are organizations that exist across the country, that do a number of things, primarily work around holding government to account. So there are 7 NGOs, NGOs that work around elections. NGOs, I can name some of them: Defend Our Democracy, that does work around democracy broadly. There's an electoral management body. There is CASAC, the Council for the Advancement of South African Constitution, that does work around protecting Constitution. And then there are 2 crucial social movements. There's Abahlali Basemjondolo, that represents 150,000 shack dwellers across the country, across 4 provinces. And there's Equal Education, that represents mostly young, working class, under 18s across the country. They have around 7,000 membership. So you have a group of NGOs, groups of professionalized work, research work, legalistic work, but you also have social movements within the panel, whose role is to bring the perspectives of communities into the panel. I think it's also an important moment, 30 years into our democracy, the formation of the panel. This 2024 moment has presented us with a lot of questions, around our democracy, a lot of questions around how our elections work, and I think has put on trial our ability to hold government to account. And what we saw with the elections this year is voters sent a strong message to public representatives that we don't really have faith in any of you, and we need new ways to engage with our representatives. And this is what this panel presents. I think it's important to note that the panel from the start doesn't necessarily believe that the electoral system that we have currently is not fit for purpose. What the panel is going to do is put our current electoral system on trial and test whether it is actually fit for purpose, whether it does actually, it is actually the best system that will ensure greater accountability. But also it will look beyond that. So it will look at other sort of democratic reforms, other ways to deepen democracy. The panel will look at things like party funding, for example, how political campaigns are financed. It will also look at things like democracy in parties and the closed list system that also has received heavy critique from within civil society.
Yeah. And I mean, there is, a lot that you've just spoken about now, but I want to stick with the point of accountability. And you mentioned, of course, the ongoing court case in as far as party funding is concerned. From an accountability perspective, how do you go about holding, a government accountable? We do know, of course, this all started when in 2020, the Constitutional Court ruled that the Electoral Act as it stood was unconstitutional. We know, of course, as you've also said, that many South Africans know that there is something wrong with the electoral system.
Yeah, so let me give further context to that. So the Constitutional Court ruled that the Electoral Act is unconstitutional because it doesn't allow for independents to contest provincial and national elections. And there was a 2.5 to 3 year process that Parliament embarked on in order to reform the electoral system. But the mandate was simplistic. The mandate was really just to allow space for independent candidates, for individuals to contest. It wasn't to explore broad electoral reform. The critiques from many within civil society was that it should have done that. It opened an opportunity to do that. The other critique that My Vote Counts brought forward was the other two critiques. Was that the process was inadequate because it didn't take on sufficient public participation. So it didn't allow the public and civil society broadly to sufficiently engage with how elections work and with the Electoral Act. The second important thing to note is that the Minister of Home Affairs set up a panel at the time. This was not the same panel that's set up now. There was a previous panel that was set up. And the panel presented 2 reports, minority report and a majority report to the Minister of Home Affairs, who at the time was Dr. Arno Saledi. And the Minister of Home Affairs only presented the minority report to Parliament, a report that was minimalist. The other report, of course, presented broad electoral reforms, presented an element of what they call a constituency-based system, which fundamentally would challenge the power of existing political parties, and therefore it was rejected. So the argument we're also presenting is that any sort of political reform that ensures greater accountability, that's better for democracy, but that challenges the power of existing power holders can't be left through existing parliamentary processes. It needs to have an element of a people-led process, and this is what we present.
Yeah. All right. Minhaj, thank you so much. I think we've got your point, and of course it will be very interesting to see how this panel then, continues to engage with government and other advisory panels that exist. But thank you so much for your time. Minhaj Jeenah is the My Votes Count Executive Director there, speaking to us there following that recently launched civil society electoral reform panel.